This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala takes historic leadership of the World Trade Organization. Sahel leaders gather in Chad amid lingering questions about involvement of France in regional security issues. And how fresh swarms of locusts are keeping locals constantly engaged in affected counties in Kenya. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
Thank you, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Egypt rolls out a plan to cut its debt load by over 70%. And we'll explore how shrinking cargo space and law orders combined to dampen the Valentine season for Kenya's flower farmers. The details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. We begin with exciting news for the African continent. Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has now officially been appointed the new chief of the World Trade Organization. This makes her the first woman and the first African to head the global organization. The WTO held a virtual special general council meeting in Geneva on Monday. Members formally selected Okonjo-Iweala as the new Director General. However, it's still not clear when she will begin her position. The WTO has not had a leader in that role since Brazilian career diplomat Roberto Azevedo stepped down last August. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has been a major achiever in Nigeria and in international posts that she's held. CGTN's Deji Badmos takes us through some of her key accomplishments.
Now, let's start with something very, very remarkable that she did that is still being practiced in the country today. Before she became the finance minister, people just didn't know what was, how much was allocated to their states or local government areas. So what she did was to ensure that every month, whatever was allocated from the federal post now to the various states of the country and the local government areas was published. So now people have a clear idea of how much their states actually get every month, so they can actually follow the money, and when their governors are not doing well, they can ask questions. That is an enduring legacy from her time that the current government is still practicing. Another thing she did wonderfully well was she spearheaded efforts now by Nigeria to secure debt relief from the Paris Club. Nigeria got about was able to save about $18 billion from that. That is, people are still talking about that till date. And you look at what she did internationally as head of Gavi, for instance, spearheading efforts to ensure that low-income countries, for instance, have access to vaccines, now different vaccines. Talk about polio vaccine, the immunization, polio immunization that took place across not just Nigeria but across Africa. So she was actually instrumental in in Africa's fight against polio and in securing that certificate, that free polio status for Africa. So she did quite a lot, especially her work for low-income countries while she was head of Gavi, and also when she was managing director of the World Bank. People are still talking about that till date. And it's all of these achievements, Hannah, that are actually standing her in good stead. And it's a reason why not just Nigerians, but across Africa and across the world, everyone wants her to head this organization.
China has congratulated the first female WTO chief and hopes that Dr. Iweala can lead the organization to help with the global response to COVID-19 as well as the global economic recovery. Chinese Ministry of Commerce state that China will firmly support the multilateral trade system. It said China would take practical actions to support Dr. Iweala in pushing forward some necessary reforms so that the body could make more contributions in global governance. Also, just who is Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala? CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
Born in the Delta State in Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo Iweala is the first woman and first African to lead the World Trade Organization. She studied economics at Harvard University before earning her PhD in regional economics and development from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A full-in tray awaits her. The Global Trade Organization is already grappling with stalled trade talks.
We want peace and security and stability. That is why the WTO is needed, with its ability to arbitrate disputes within members.
The 66-year-old mother of four spent 25 years as a development economist at the World Bank. While there, she rose to the number 2 position as managing director, overseeing the bank's $81 billion operational portfolio in Africa, South Asia, Europe and Central Asia. Okonjo Iweala has had 2 spells as finance minister and a short stint as foreign minister in Nigeria. She is currently the chair of the Board of International Vaccines Alliance, Gavi. She also serves on Twitter's board of directors and is a special envoy for the World Health Organization's COVID-19 fight.
Let us just look and see.
Despite not being involved in trade policy in much of her career, she has dealt with international trade through her work as development economist and finance minister. She described trade as a mission and a passion.
Let's try to fix what needs fixing. And if we didn't have the WTO, we would have to invent it.
Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, earlier we spoke to Nigerian economist Paul Alaje, who is of the view that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's role in the World Trade Organization would boost the profile of Africa in global trade.
There were a lot of threats to global trade, particularly between America and China, before COVID came. At that time, the former president of America, President Trump, had alleged China to have had over $500 billion trade deficit, which was in favor of China and against America. America had imposed new laws that were strange on China, and China has responded time and again. The world knew that we need an umpire that was unbiased, neither American nor an European, or more importantly, nor an Asian. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is now satisfying those conditions to see that there is fairness among the superpower. When it comes to trade, China and America, of course, as superpower, dominate most of the global export and global trade. It is now very important that someone with background, not just in finance, but also in economics, exchange and trade, is the chair of World Trade Organization. So priority is trade fairness, how we smaller countries, less developed countries, also have opportunity to reconsider what their export looks like and to participate in a global trade front. Well, I think a lot will be done for the continent. Recall that Dr. Okonjo-Iweala had led in many countries, not just Nigeria. There is no way you can remove the Africanness in her because she's now leading the world. The truth is that global trade participation for Africa is very low, in spite of the fact that Africa have signed Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, but the contribution to global trade by Africa is still very, very low. But with the position that she occupies, it will now encourage Africa to know what are we missing as a continent and as a people. What are we missing in terms of export? The truth is that Africa still exports a number of things. I take you to Cancun Talk 2000, where Africa were told what to export, how much to charge, and the quantity to export. Definitely, Africa was muzzled. That was a World Trade Organization conference, a global conference that has to do with trade. I know, having one of us, an African, chairing a World Trade Organization, it now becomes very important for the world to know that African can have a voice on what we produce. Most of the raw materials in the world come from African continent. And without these raw materials, it will be very difficult for service and industry to operate functionally. And that is why I strongly believe that Africa, starting from Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, countries that produce raw materials, we start at a better chance to have value for their outputs.
Well, let's now take a look at other news from the continent. Data released by South Africa's health ministry shows a drop in COVID-19 infections in that country. The positivity rate now stands at just under 6.5%. That's compared to 10% in the previous 2 months. However, South Africa still has the highest number of coronavirus infections and related deaths on the continent. Angela Coppola reports.
South African plans to fight the COVID-19 pandemic with a vaccine program were dealt a blow when the results for the AstraZeneca trial were released recently. It caused the health department to pivot away from their first choice to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But all is not lost, according to the government.
The first thing we want is our scientists must tell us what do we do with AstraZeneca and how quickly can we bring it back to stream. That is what will guide what else we do about it. So there's no plan to send it back as we speak. The plan is to find out from scientists how to deal with it going forward.
Some scientists are still optimistic about the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
I think there's a global interest in terms of understanding exactly and getting solid data as to whether the AZ vaccine protects against the COVID-19 variant, which is circulating in South Africa. I think the funding of that probably is, at this stage, probably the least of our problems, because there's been a number of groups that have actually volunteered to provide a conclusive answer as to whether the vaccine actually works and protects against severe disease, as we believe it does.
Besides the use of vaccines to fight the pandemic, authorities maintain that lockdowns remain an important tool in preventing the spread of the virus.
The lockdown basically becomes a response to a raging infection. And we have really avoided to go to the kind of lockdown that we had at the beginning. Every now and again, we might need to intervene, but we believe that we're learned enough, that South Africans will be very cooperative and supportive, that they will use the masks and distancing and hand washing and sanitizers so that we can delay as much as possible the emergence of the third surge.
Obtaining population immunity is the objective of the South African program, but it doesn't end there.
Even if we're to vaccinate as many people as we can during this year, we'll still need to keep the use of masks, the sanitizers, distancing for as long as possible until we are able to conclude that the risk of this infection is abated.
The battle against the viruses and its variants is far from over, and it's going to take a concerted effort from everyone to get this done. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Somalia is reporting a resurgence of new COVID-19 cases for the first time in several months. The country's health ministry says this signals a possible second wave of the pandemic. From the country's capital, Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo with more.
On Sunday, 4 people succumbed to COVID-19 in Somalia, the highest number of deaths recorded in a single day so far this year, according to data from the Somali Ministry of Health. Authorities have warned that COVID-19 infections are increasing again, signaling that a possible second wave could be deadlier than the first one witnessed in the country last year.
The infection rate has shot up by 52% compared to that recorded in January. Cases have gone up in February as we increase our testing capacity. In 2020, we placed more emphasis on awareness and saved many lives. The threat level has gone down, and that should not be the case. People should be cautious.
Medics at the Di Martino Hospital, the sole COVID-19 treatment center in the capital, have reported a high number of cases in recent weeks, with patients complaining of having coronavirus symptoms. Authorities are struggling to restock critical supplies with additional oxygen cylinders brought to the treatment unit to address the rising number of positive cases.
We have learned crucial lessons from last year as the pandemic hit most countries of the world. Medical doctors in the country's hospitals must rally to provide treatment and awareness against the disease. Together, we can end this disease as private citizens and the government.
Last week, the European Union donated €5 million to boost the government's efforts to curb the spread of the virus. The funds will also be used to support health service delivery across much of the country as Somalia's healthcare system starts to recover from the aftershock of the global pandemic. Elsewhere, more than 1 million doses of vaccines are expected to arrive in the country later in February. The federal government wants to inoculate 3 million people in its initial phase of the mass vaccination exercise.
We expect vaccine doses as part of 120 countries that will receive free vaccines from the World Health Organization. We will not accept any vaccine that has not received certification by the global health body. The AstraZeneca vaccine will be administered to more than 500,000 health workers, security forces, immigration workers, and people with chronic diseases.
Despite the rising number of cases, no new measures have been announced by the government. Authorities have urged people to wear face masks in public places. Meanwhile, experts attribute the low number of cases to lack of mass testing, which they say has undermined efforts to curb the spread of the virus. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Meanwhile, Zimbabwe has received its first batch of COVID-19 vaccines. The 200,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine donated by China were received by Zimbabwe's Vice President. Farai Mokutia reports.
The 200,000 vials that arrived on board this jet will kickstart the national inoculation drive and bolster the response to a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic.
It would have been easy for China to direct its effort inward at this time. But rather than take the easy path, China has continued to support our efforts to contain the pandemic. We received this vaccine as a gleam of hope to the nation that finally we may be on the verge of returning to some semblance of normalcy.
Zimbabwe is one of the first countries to receive the Sinopharm vaccine and plans to get more.
We have a program, and next month we'll be again acquiring additional vaccines from China to the tune of at least 600,000 doses, and the program will continue as we head towards to that target of 1.8 million that will acquire from the People's Republic of China.
Zimbabwe intends to vaccinate 10 million citizens. From here, these vaccines will be distributed to all 10 provinces of the country, ready for inoculations to begin as soon as possible. At the front of the queue to receive those jabs will be healthcare workers, people manning Zimbabwe's border posts, and those employed in the security sector. The jab will assist those in the health sector improve their service delivery.
This will definitely give confidence to the health workers because as it is, they are the most affected people, considering that we don't have any other option. Look at the issue of PPEs. They are in short supply in Zimbabwe in our hospitals, meaning our nurses are vulnerable to COVID-19, and if they are protected with the vaccines, then definitely will be protecting the citizens of Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe is yet to confirm which other vaccines it will administer, but the government says it is in talks with Russia and India to discuss the possibility of getting their jabs. Farai Mokutia, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up when we return. Sahel leaders gather in Chad amid lingering questions about involvement of France in regional security issues. And how fresh swarms of locusts are keeping locals constantly engaged in affected counties in Kenya.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. We'll now go to the Chadian capital of N'Djamena, where the Sahel Region Security Summit is underway. The meeting brings together leaders from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. The meeting will be held over 2 days, with French President Emmanuel Macron participating via video link. The G5 initiative was started 7 years ago with the aim of improving regional cooperation, development, and security in that region. This year's meeting is expected to address security and terrorism concerns. According to UN reports, militia groups have claimed thousands of lives and caused close to 2 million displacements in the Sahel. A year ago, France deployed an extra 600 troops to improve security. Despite those reinforcements, though, the jihadists remain active. 5 French soldiers are among those killed since December of last year. Well, we're now joined from London by Dr. Manu Lekunze. He's an expert in African security matters. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. What are some of the most pressing issues that leaders in the Sahel region need to address?
So the first thing, of course, is the issue of security. So as you clearly mentioned, over 500,000 people dead, over 2 million displaced. So that is the most pressing issue in the Sahel. But then you have to ask the question, why? Why are we facing this crisis at this magnitude and at this time? So the key thing that the leaders have to think about, because they're heads of state, it's important for them to understand how the state in the Sahel, the various nations of the Sahel, has decayed over time and is no longer capable of providing the services that a state provides for its people, and key of those services is security, of course. So it's very important that they begin to understand and ask themselves questions. Why is it that these states are no longer able to provide basic services for their people, including security? And what is the role of France to play in this process of reforming and providing the kind of capabilities that states need to provide security? So that they cannot escape from this important point.
And added to that, Doctor, how effective has the intervention of France in Sahel security and counter-terrorism strategies been?
So, you know, this is a very important question, but also a very difficult question, because the states of the Sahel need the technical support of France and the financial support of France. They do need it, it's clear that, and they also need the manpower that the French soldiers provide. At the same time, on the political level, because of the colonial relationship or links or history between France and the region, there is that anti-French sentiment within society, which makes it complicated in the sense that, yes, France is necessary to provide the skills and the training and even some of the fighting that is necessary, but the role of France in itself is very political. So it helps on one level and doesn't quite help in another level, because the presence of France can help to radicalize some people and increase the insecurity problem, whereas the presence of France is also necessary to help deal with the problem. So it's a complex issue. I know a lot of people will say, oh, France get out or France come in, but it's not as easy as you may hear from the news or from the streets in this region. So it's a complex issue, but the most important thing is that the state in this region no longer works. Everyone says this. And the solution is not more military force, but how can we reform the state to be able to meet the needs, the changing needs of the region? As you rightly said, the population of the region is doubling. The environment, the climate is changing. the economies are not growing. So there are a myriad of problems in the region that need proper state solutions that are lacking. And this is the main problem happening in the Sahel today.
Doctor, speak to us about the challenge of funding in lines of what you have said, and also just in funding the economies, but also with the G5 force, which has been outstanding for so long. What needs to be done to resolve that issue? And as you've said, very, very complex issue, and I suppose we can't discuss it all in the short time that we do have, but what do you think the key priorities are that they could begin doing?
So yes, security is expensive. Everybody knows this. Building a state is expensive. So and you need to understand that the states of this region are among some of the poorest states on earth. So Niger, for example, is one of the poorest states on earth. So funding is an issue that the states cannot generate their own resources to finance their own security. That's the key problem. The second problem is that France, who takes the lead in these issues, is one state who has struggled to motivate the international community to provide financing to the level that is needed. So France turns to bear the burden of the intervention by itself with little support from the EU, the US, and the UK. So it's an issue that appears to be a French issue, therefore requires French funding, but it's really the Sahel is not very far from Europe. So the Sahel is an African problem, but also a European problem. So funding needs to be coordinated from Europe, as well as thinking about what can we do in terms of the economies of the states of the Sahel region, so that they can themselves be able to generate a level of financing that is necessary to provide security. So the problem is a security issue, but it's also a political and economic issue. So you have to deal with the economics, the local economics of the states, so that they can have the finance to go a long way to finance their security, while France and the rest are motivating or mobilizing international finance to help. So it's a two-way financing problem. At the present, there's simply both parties don't have the money to finance security in the Sahel. So that's why it makes it even more complex, because there's just no money to deal with it.
Dr. Lekunze, thank you so much for all that. Dr. Manu Lekunze is an expert in African security matters. Let's move over to Guinea, where the health agency there has confirmed a new Ebola outbreak in that country. 7 cases and at least 3 deaths have so far been reported in the country's southeast region. 7 of those who had contracted the illness are reported to have attended a funeral in Ngozi town early this month. The health ministry says that they are contact tracing individuals who may have come into contact with the sick. Some are already in isolation.
Very early this morning, the Safik Conakry laboratory confirmed the presence of the Ebola virus. So this puts Guinea in a situation of Ebola epidemic. There were a total of 7 cases, including 3 deaths. Of the 7, 4 were men and 3 were women. 3 were isolated, 1 in Conakry and 2 in Zerekore.
The 7 cases are the first declared since the country last battled the disease about 5 years ago. The government has sent an emergency team to support local teams in Ngozi and has accelerated the procurement of Ebola vaccines from the World Health Organization. Health experts in Guinea say these latest cases could be a major setback for the country, which is also battling COVID-19. The new cases are in the same region where the previous Ebola epidemic started in Guinea. More than 11,000 people died in that outbreak, which also hit neighboring Liberia and Sierra Leone between 2014 and 2016.
I was in panic. I couldn't even control myself when I learned that Ebola has returned to Guinea because of what we went through in 2013 and 2014 with Sierra Leone and Liberia. We are Africans, we are poor, and if diseases like Ebola or the coronavirus appear in Africa, it is only God who will save us.
Well, earlier we spoke with Tejan Bagura. He is a journalist and health specialist from Conakry, Guinea. This is what he had to say.
The National Health Agency director said that they have officially declared the outbreak of the Ebola pandemic in the country. And the second was sending a mission to the southern region where the disease was discovered. And that mission would be delimiting the area of contamination and also contacting possible suspect contacts. And the third one would be to discover what is the origin of the disease. It is from a former patient who was cured and the disease came back in the body, or is it from an animal origin? So these are the measures taken by the government till now concerning the Ebola disease. What's been here from the government official is that the country is prepared, according to them, because this is not the first time we've experienced Ebola. For the first outbreak in 2014, 2015, we have had care centers that are specialized in treating this kind of diseases. Well, from what I've been heard is that the government officials seem to be confident that they've had care center in Guinea, in a lot of care centers in Guinea, especially in the southern region where the Ebola disease was discovered, and in Conakry. And they have also called upon doctors and medical personnel that were sent to ID Congo to fight against the Ebola disease there. So we have means to fight against the corona. Not the corona, but the Ebola outbreak. So the government officials seem to be very, very, very confident, and they are sure that with the care center that we have and with the medical personnel that we have, we can effectively defeat this second outbreak of the Ebola disease. As for international support, I think the government officials in the meeting yesterday, they were surrounded by personnel of the World Health Organization that promised to help Guinea in fighting this new outbreak of the Ebola disease. For now, there is no vaccine in Guinea to fight against, but the World Health Organization has promised that the vaccine will be brought to Guinea within the next 24 hours or the next 72 hours. So the World Health Organization is actively in touch with the authority of Guinea.
Well, let's recap on some of the top stories for this hour. Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo Iweala has now officially been appointed the new chief of the World Trade Organization. This makes her the first woman and the first African to head the global body. The WTO held a virtual special general council meeting in Geneva on Monday, where members formally selected Okonjo Iweala as a new director general. Data released by South Africa's health ministry shows a drop in COVID-19 infections in that country. The positivity rate now stands at just under 6.5%. That's compared to 10% in the previous 2 months. However, South Africa still has the highest number of coronavirus infections and related deaths on the continent. And the Sahel Region Security Summit is underway in the Chadian capital of N'Djamena. The meeting brings together leaders from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. The meeting will be held over 2 days, with French President Emmanuel Macron participating via video link. Well, those are some of the stories that are making headlines this hour. Let's now take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Egypt rolls out plans to cut its public debt to GDP ratio under 79%. And shrinking cargo space and law orders have dampened the Valentine season for Kenyan flower farmers.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in North Africa, where Egypt's government aims to cut its public debt to GDP ratio to under 80% in the next 3 years. Authorities in the North African state say this strategy focuses on reducing the cost of debt service and also lowering the external debt to GDP ratio to under 30% over the medium term. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
The last few years have seen Egypt's public debt rise significantly as government has been financing an aggressive 5-year economic reform plan. It includes upgrades in all sectors and costly infrastructure projects that require significant cash expenditure. In his address to Parliament, Finance Minister Mohamed Mait said the country is targeting a gradual reduction of public debt to reach 79% of GDP by 2024 from the current 108%.
The Minister of Finance has set a difficult target of reducing debt by a big margin. The best way is to increase foreign investments for economic growth to increase. He should continue our policies of improving the economic climate for investors, upgrade the infrastructure to allow for long-term manufacturing industries and expand public and private sectors. This in turn reduces unemployment and inflation rates and significantly increases economic growth. Doing so means you have created high enough income that allows you to cover the budget deficit without borrowing.
The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, which is now running into its second year, has taken a negative toll on the North African country and instigated a flurry of extra borrowing from the international markets to keep the economy moving.
Our foreign debt last year was $33 billion and will exceed $37 billion this fiscal year. It's not in the dangerous level yet. Actually, we are on a strong footing with positive growth rates despite the coronavirus crisis holding us back from our targets. The drop in tourism revenue from $12 billion to $3 billion has had an impact on the budget, but a recovery in other sectors will help in bridging the gap.
The strategy will eventually see the government aiming to lower external debt to GDP from 36% to below 30% on the medium term. It also aims to improve governmental security in markets to expand the investors' base that will in turn provide the required liquidity to support the budget. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now on to East Africa, where Kenya's Flour Council says that high taxes, a lack of cargo flight and poor weather in its key market in Europe are all combining to weigh down on Kenya's flour exporters' outlook for business this Valentine's season. Now this came as the council projected that the sector, which was hit fairly hard by the effects of the pandemic, would recover by the end of the year. According to the Kenyan Flour Council, farmers are exporting only 75% of their produce due to a lack of flights and limited space. Kenya exported some 170,000 tons of flours in 2020. Europe accounts for nearly 70% of the East African nations' cut flour exports. Coronavirus restrictions had, however, cut daily orders by half, threatening thousands of jobs in the country. For the South, Tanzania's earnings from travel fell by 59% in the month of December 2020 to just over $1 billion. That resulted in a decline in overall earnings from exports of goods and services by $849.3 million. Before the global pandemic broke out, tourism was Tanzania's leading source of hard currency earnings. It earned the country some $2.5 billion in 2019. That's according to data from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Tourism. Now, the value of traditional exports also fell to $8.8 billion in December last year from $9.65 billion a year before. The central bank has attributed the decrease to declines in export values of low production of coffee and cotton, as well as reduced volumes and prices of tea and sisal. Away from the African continent now, government data showed that the Japanese economy expanded more than expected in the fourth quarter. The country's stronger than expected data came as Tokyo's benchmark Nikkei index jumped nearly 2% today on hopes of a business recovery. Here's CGTN's Mayu Yoshida reporting from Tokyo.
It's a record day here in Tokyo. The Nikkei share average closed above the psychologically important 30,000 mark. This 30,000 line is a level we haven't seen since August of 1990, which is over 30 years ago. So it was quite a remarkable day in terms of stock moves in Japan. Japanese stocks have gained a lot, especially since corporate earnings season kicked off 2 weeks ago, as majority of companies surprised investors with positive earnings, and in fact, many of them upgrading their earnings outlook. Keep in mind that the Nikkei has risen roughly 7% in the last 2 weeks alone because at home, as I said, earnings were really good and a vaccine rollout is starting somewhere this week. And data-wise, this morning we saw Japan's GDP data. Now, this GDP data covered the 3 months ending December, and compared to the previous quarter, it showed a 12% growth from the previous quarter as exports continued to roar back and businesses started to invest again. And we're also seeing gains in household spending thanks to government stimulus measures. So all of these factors started to show resilience in the Japanese economy. So investors are betting on economic recovery here, especially after the virus emergency, which is scheduled to end in the next couple of weeks. And that's why all sorts of investors, especially foreign investors, jump to buy Japanese shares with a totally bullish view. As for individuals today, energy and healthcare stocks led gains. And the next benchmark would be the Nikkei's all-time high of 38,900 line. And in order to break that level, the Nikkei would need to gain almost another 30%.
On to a fascinating story from Down Under. Australia says the two key tech giants, Google and Facebook, at least as far as the news business is concerned, the two of them apparently near a deal to pay its domestic media companies for the content they generate. Now, this comes ahead of Canberra's move to create the world's first law that would force these digital giants to pay for news that pops up on its searches or its feeds. Google and Facebook, however, are yet to comment on this story. Both of the tech giants have publicly opposed the planned legislation. Google, in fact, threatened to shut down its search engine if the law was enacted.
Both the media proprietors and the digital giants, I think, recognise that we have something that is workable here in Australia, something that we can take forward, something that can ensure a sustainable media landscape, and something that will see journalism continued and journalists rewarded for generating original content.
Let's shift our attention to Uganda. A group of young entrepreneurs there hoping to solve the problem of poor waste disposal in the capital, Kampala. Through a mobile application, they're essentially linking garbage collectors to people who are in need of their services in virtually real time. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga has that story.
The next day as a must. Yeah, they're supposed to be seen.
This team of high-tech entrepreneurs are hoping to solve one of Kampala's major problems, garbage. They've designed a mobile application to ease the work of garbage collectors. And with just a click, a waste hauler is at your doorstep.
A person in the community can just simply use this application that is on their phone, right? They're using their smartphone every day. So they can just use that smartphone to order for a waste pickup at their convenience, right? They can be at work, they might even be outside the country and order for a waste pickup. And we can connect them to a waste hauler in their community.
Over 100 clients have subscribed to your waste service.
Makes work easier. We're in touch with them. It's easier to know their problems. They're easier to come to us. Payments are made easier. Less contact.
And for homeowners, the service is timely.
The system is good. It doesn't allow waste to pile up in an area. It is convenient and promotes hygiene.
Environmentalists say poor waste disposal is the leading cause of pollution in the country. This truck collects about 24 tons of garbage every day, but local authorities say it's not enough to collect all the garbage disposed of in the city. Government statistics show that over 350,000 tons of waste is generated annually from the city, and only half of this is collected.
We have a few challenges that we're working on, say solid waste management, to ensure that bottles, to ensure that polythene are all managed well and taken out of our drainages.
They are now encouraging people to recycle waste.
We can be able to send over a truck that is just going to be able to collect that organic waste and take it to a recycler that is recycling, let me say, organic waste briquettes, collect the plastic waste, take it to a person that's recycling it, collect paper waste, take it to a person that's recycling it. In that way, we're trying to make sure that the waste is not only decreased in Kampala and taken to a landfill, but also decreased from the landfill itself.
The innovators of this mobile application hope that by the end of this year, they will have over 10,000 households in the capital Kampala using the mobile app, a move that could help save the environment from choking with waste. Hilara Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And across the border in Kenya, swarms of desert locusts have so far been reported in at least 15 of the country's 47 counties. The locust infestation is causing some pretty anxious moments for locals in Laikipia County. Take a look.
This is what people living in Kenya's Laikipia County have been forced to do for some time now. They've been screaming and striking at desert locusts as they try to chase the pest away.
We are even tired. We have been fighting them and we have been shouting at them until we are now tired. Some of us are even losing our voices and others have become exhausted just dealing with them.
Maurice Kisio is a chief within the county. He says he has been receiving new reports about the sighting of locusts in the area.
This is very dangerous to our community because it will lead to drought later. There won't be a good harvest as a result. Also, our livestock won't have foliage to feed on, and hence we expect a famine later.
The chief says he has informed the Locust Control Center based inside the Lower Conservancy of the struggle Laikipia residents are enduring. The Conservancy has since begun aerial spraying operations targeting the pests.
Around 5:30 we get up before sunrise and get the plane ready, and then I wait for the spotter plane, which is the helicopter. He goes, make sure the swarm is sprayable. Challenges here we have met are just a lot of people around the swarm, so it's hard to spray.
The daily spraying that the team has been conducting has been a success. It has reduced locust swarms to 3 on average, from the usual 10 to 12 separate swarms they were dealing with last month. Njamungai, CGTN.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at the WTO. Nigeria's former finance minister has made history as the first woman and the first African to run the body. But as far as trade policy is concerned, there's a lot in her in tray. What exactly are the priorities she will tackle first? We'll explore that in a bit more detail at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We'll see you then, Rama. Let's now take a short break and return your sport news, including... We speak with Senegal's wrestling queen Isabelle Sambo as she takes the sport to more girls in her country.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Every year, approximately 400 million tons of plastic is produced, and about 40% of that is single use.
79% of that is not recycled, it's not turned into energy, it's just going into landfill or into the environment in some way.
And each year, it is estimated that between 5 to 8 million tons of plastic makes it into our oceans.
When it comes to the environmental cost of plastic, the most obvious one is the entanglement issue, because of plastic getting into food webs, so animals eating plastic.
With the global focus on plastic pollution and my eldest son Tristan studying marine biology, I wanted to get involved and see for myself the true extent of the pollution in our region. We're on our way! Finally the journey starts! I decided that we should go on a voyage off the beaten track, a journey that focuses on the impact of plastics in our oceans.
Hopefully the sea gods are good to us and we have reasonable sailing conditions.
Time now for a look at what's happening in the world of sport. Isabel Sambo, famously known as Africa's